Hello, 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 everybody. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are in this world. I am here with a very special guest today. I am here with the co-inventor of Genius Crypto, Robert Genito. Robert, how are you today, man? Good afternoon.
Hi, I'm all right. I'm all right. I'll
Good
be
to hear.
better.
Good to hear, man. No, I'm happy to have you. I've been watching Genius from the sidelines, and I'm seeing it grow, and I'm seeing it. Your community is growing, and I'm seeing people are very receptive of it. And I'm happy to talk to you about the intricacies of Genius. And I'm just curious about a lot of things that I've seen about Genius, especially the different components thereof. So I'm happy to have you, man.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for having me. As you were saying before, I've been very selective on any interviews because I'm working a lot lately on the language, the communication,
Sure.
and helping other team members build the tools necessary for the community to take over, like Bitcoin had.
That's nice. That's good to
Yeah.
hear.
So I've been
I
busy and selective.
No, I like that because it's definitely so like you have a definitely a perspective here that's very interesting because there are some people who agree with the fact that it's necessary to go to the Satoshi route and not have a hierarchical structure in a cryptocurrency, whether it be a figurehead, whether it be a foundation, whether it be a centralized authority, whatever it may be. And then you have those who are juxtaposition of that, who think that a hierarchical structure is necessary or a figurehead is necessary. And I tend to think that there are pros to both of those. But I do believe that obviously the inception of cryptocurrency was created by someone who is completely anonymous and is probably, in my opinion, dead. So, it's definitely you definitely have this interesting perspective surrounding um, the decentralized notion and no hierarchy regarding your project. So I want to ask you this then. For those who may not be familiar, tell us about Genius. What is it, and what inspired you to develop this project within the crypto sphere?
Genius is a decentralized blockchain depository that is economically driven by artificial intelligence. In other words, it encapsulates the thing we know as value, the fundamental level. In other words, the token, like all tokens encapsulating something,
Mm-hmm.
right? It encapsulates human attention and intentions, or like commitments and promises.
Mm-hmm.
It encapsulates that to create a store of value utility token for traders and savers. So not just savers, not just people who are saving for the future, but also for traders.
Mm-hmm.
It does this by it creates constant market arbitrage that incentivizes traders to pump the Genius token, to pump
Mm-hmm.
its market price while also paying daily revenue to savers, such as stakers, miners, etc. You
Oh,
also asked where it comes from, right?
yeah.
Well, about 5, 6 years ago, I was really inspired by both Dash cryptocurrency and Steem. Dan Larimer's work with Steem,
Yeah.
even though he had left it, and very inspired by it, and inspired by how Steem was really giving rewards to people based on others' attention. And I thought that was really cool. And so I started writing articles about the future of money.
Mm-hmm.
And some people came and went development wise or idea wise that I just talked with a lot. Even people like yourself, just talking in this kind of capacity. And met up with a PhD in mathematics. He was an engineer. And then as I was researching these things even more before jumping into white paper tokenomics and et cetera,
Mm-hmm.
ended up meeting a couple of the guys from the Hex community who were very instrumental in the tokenomics for Hex, who saw problems in the overall store of value world and the overall problems in like how people want the number to go up or they want value to go up over time, but there's so many problems that exist in our own world today that prevent that.
Yes.
So common interest, we attracted each other and talked a lot.
No, I appreciate you bringing up like the really old school cryptocurrencies, like for example, like Dash, that really amalgamated successful privacy notions and Dash was one of those projects that really rose to prominence, I feel like, in 2017. And then you have
Yeah.
this
And it
idea.
and it rose in prominence
Yes.
when I was working with Dash, another company for onboarding and exchange and in-wallet developments. So Ryan Taylor, not to cut you off, but I'm
No,
just
go
so
ahead.
excited about Dash even still today. The
Yeah.
CEO of the core group at the time, Ryan Taylor, myself, we worked with another exchange company and then two more
Awesome.
larger exchanges and a marketing firm to solve the problem with adoption, which is still a problem today.
Oh, without
And
question.
you saw what that did to Dash.
Yeah, absolutely. The problem with adoption right now, it's very surprising. And I was going to get to Steam in a second, but it's very surprising how privacy coins with the onset. Well, this preceded cryptocurrency, but the Patriot Act. Then you also have the notion um, of you have the Patriot Act, and you have the NSA surveillance paradigm. You
Mm.
have big tech silencing and censoring people. So I'm very surprised, like cryptocurrencies like Dash, like Ncash, like Monero. Oh no, Zcash. I'm sorry, not Ncash. Zcash,
Zcash
like Monero.
or Nano. Maybe you meant to say Nano.
Yeah, Nano's another one. Yeah, that really haven't rose to prominence, like in a type of privacy narrative. I'm very surprised. And Steam it, I also remember it very vividly, and I find it to be very valuable. Um, I know a lot of people maybe who got into cryptocurrency recently may not know what Steemit was, but Steemit was great because it monetized education and monetized activity. It was almost like, for what I remember, it was basically like an educational social media platform that incentivized growth through activity. And I found that
That's
to be
awesome.
very valuable. Yeah, I found that to be very, very, very valuable. And I'm surprised it's kind of gone the wayside. So it's definitely an interesting amalgamation between your love of Dash and your love of Steam It, because those were two fantastic projects, and they still are fantastic projects. And Warrants, I see your $6 super chat. I really appreciate that. I love Genie.
Awesome.
He's talking about comparing, competing to Hex. We're actually gonna talk about something that in a little bit about how Genius is actually gonna help hexagons with something that I think Robert and the team have created. Um,
Another free airdrop.
yeah, there you go. So
Mexicans are just blessed with all those airdrops.
yeah, so we're definitely gonna talk about that. So I think that there's I don't know. I don't see maybe he's talking about comparing and competing to Hex, like sympathizing. How Genie can sympathize with hexagons. I think the sympathizing will come up with with the topic that I'm going to bring up in a bit. Um, but I do want to ask you this then. Is it
Well,
appears that Genius has multiple components or units surrounding its ecosystem. What are these units, and how do they synergistically work in tandem together?
that's a great idea. Great question to ask on that because you see, is you just mentioned hexagons asking and talking about this, right?
Mhm.
And in the hex world, you don't just have the hex token, you
Right.
also have T shares
Yep.
and B shares. And similarly, Genius has like four basic units to it.
Mhm.
The first is the Genius token itself, right?
Mhm.
The ERC20 standard token.
Right.
The second is Genius Debt. Genius Debt is a very new concept in DeFi. And I say very new because it really doesn't have to do anything with borrowing or lending. It's a very different tokenomics and mechanics.
Mhm.
The third are the Genius shares themselves. Uh, IQ shares is what they're called, just for fun.
I like
Uh,
that.
and and also, well, if you really want to know, it's a quintillion shares. And then there's
Okay, that's
the
a lot.
NFTs, which is a Genius Edition NFT. So you have these four different units. Say a
See,
lot about them. Which one would you like to know about?
no, anyone that you want to discuss, I'm down to listen to all four. I mean, I appreciate when you have
Yeah,
an ecosystem that creates value through synergistic a synergistic relationship per se.
Yeah, well, it's and that's very people appreciate this, especially when you have an interesting white paper you can read, right? Not that
Of
we
course.
all sit around and read white papers, but I almost said read write papers or read write paper. By the way,
Look,
is this my left side on the stream?
that's
I don't even
so
know.
on the stream it's the left side, but on your but looking at you, I know it's your right side.
Oh, okay. So there's the Genius token, which that's, let's say, it's the only token. Well, I wouldn't say it that way, but the Genius token can be held, it can be burned, or it can be transferred at any time, without any limitations whatsoever, and no taxes. It's not a tax token.
I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, and the Genius token itself, it's necessary to create Genius miners, which
Okay.
we'll talk more about that in a second. So the Genius token, it can be used on exchanges or redeemed from the Genius contract to receive collateral, stablecoin collateral. A lot of utility. And then Genius debt, on the other hand, a lot of people who are familiar with the Genius white paper sometimes call it stability pool and stuff. But Genius debt, it's something you cannot hold. It is issued to you by depositing blockchain asset collateral to the Genius smart contract.
Mm-hmm.
And debt itself, Genius debt itself, it's encapsulated by a Genius miner, where that debt may be auctioned or transferred to someone, right? So debt allows the Genius token to be burned in order to redeem the collateral that's in the pool. So you can probably tell already, like, there's a lot to talk about with Genius
Yes,
debt,
there is.
but I'll let you know about the other items, because Genius debt is a very new concept. You don't see it in any cryptocurrency, and it's not debt in the traditional sense where
Mhm.
you owe something to a bank and then you're paying a bank and a bank is profiting. But Genius debt is in a way where these Genius eventually has to be returned to the contract itself, and not to a bank, but returned to the contract itself, and then that you get your collateral. And instead of benefiting a bank or such, you're benefiting the entire Genius ecosystem, all of the Genius users. So lots of benefits there. Next is Genius shares, the IQ shares. Now I'm glad you brought up earlier, some people in the Hex world watching and bringing this up, because Hex is a good metaphor. Just like when Hex was out, Bitcoin was a great metaphor. And even with Genius, Bitcoin's a great metaphor. So Genius shares, in the Hex world, you burn your Hex to get T shares, right?
Yes.
And then the T shares, you earn things, or you earn more Hex and stuff. With Genius, when you give up your Genius to the smart contract, or you give up Genius debt, one or the other, either Genius debt or the Genius token, you're given shares. You're given Genius shares. And so those shares are what give you the right to Genius's revenue, the incoming revenue stream, and new mints and new inflation for Genius. So that's given to you. So wealth is redistributed to you. Shares, just like Genius debt, shares are also encapsulated by a miner.
Okay.
So it's like a stake in Hex. And also, just like debt or a miner, the ownership of that miner, you can transfer that anytime you want.
Mm-hmm.
Genius ensures that everyone has multiple paths to liquidity.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the shares. Then the next is the Genius NFTs. Those are an extension to the Genius contract via ERC 1155 tokens.
Okay.
Long story short, they add unlimited potential to to Genius, and extra features to Genius or such, without changing the contract.
These
So
are
right now we have a first edition, which is just fun educational collectibles that help different pumpamentals with Genius. And those are the 4 basic tokens.
No, that's a big deal. And someone said, Love Rich said, "Hey, Robert Genius, did you know that Superman just had you guys on his AI list and he bought?"
I don't know who Superman is, but that sounds awesome.
Superman.
Oh, Superman?
Do you know who that is?
Nope.
Okay, so
Sorry, Superman.
Superman.
My
Okay,
bad.
so Superman in 2017 was arguably the largest I would dare say, one of the top 5 largest YouTubers in this
Oh,
space.
wow.
I would say in
Wow.
2023, he's not the top 5 largest anymore, but he definitely has some prominence, a large amount of prominence in this space surrounding cryptocurrency and blockchain. I think he has upwards of 170,000 subscribers. I used to watch him religiously back in 2017.
Oh.
He introduced me to so many projects like Neo, like Ant Shares, um, and shares, like Neo, like QuantStamp, like Bitcoins was turned into Ethos, was turned into Voyager, Substratum,
Hmm.
Medical Chain, BitBay, Burst. Introduced me to all. Actually, I think he introduced me to Dash.
So
He's a what?
he's talked about basically the things that were novel then.
Yes, yes, exactly. And
Good eye.
he's been on with Richard Hart. He's been on with a lot of people. So he definitely it's definitely an interesting scenario, and that's pretty awesome. A- And I
Well,
want to ask you,
AI,
what?
I mean, AI, I apologize to cut
No,
you
no,
off,
go
but
ahead.
I mean, we all know that AI is like, you know, chat GPT, people that is enabling people to really amplify their abilities, amplify their understanding, almost like with chat GPT, almost like you're in Star Trek and you have data right by you to like tell you things.
Mhm.
And then we have other AI with like the AI pictures. So you might know that I'm not AI because you can see my fingers nice and they're
Yeah, I
not going
figured as much.
crazy. but
Yeah.
but here, AI with finance and blockchain is Genius is going to show people just how bizarre, but also how that amplifies their financial abilities, how that can be used as a tool for that. Granted that people use it.
hmm Absolutely. And it's definitely an interesting scenario when you amalgamate um, so many different components of a protocol together to bring a suite of products into one ecosystem. You have NFTs, which NFTs are obviously something that's very popular. You've created a DeFi suite with collateralization, with the notion of debt. You've created an ability to create yield as well, and you also have something that's very interesting that I'm very interested in is AI, and we can't and AI is definitely something that I am very interested in because you have different innovations and narratives that are coming to the cyber world that surround themselves with AIs,
Yeah.
surrounding, for example, Chat GPT, which is a big narrative right now surrounding artificial intelligence. You also have a very large narrative surrounding AI. I mean, Singularity, AGI, is a very prominent coin now. Back in 2017, it was as well. Um, you have Fetch AI, so you definitely have this artificial intelligence narrative that is really, really, really giving is creating a notion of is creating a notion of a narrative that could, and again, this is speculative, that could be a part of the next trend, and just a trend in civilization in general in the regards to artificial intelligence. So I want to discuss the AI component of Genie, as it appears that AI is starting to become a narrative within the cyber world. How is, because you brought up AI before, how is Genius utilizing AI in its technology?
Well, well, it has created that notion in the next trend because it's working. And how that's happened is uh, you see how Solidity works and smart contracts is everything's on a transactional basis, right? And that's okay. That's great. Uh, but there's a lot of challenges to overcome there, significant challenges. So maybe that's why we don't see a whole lot of AI now in blockchain.
Hmm
But first things first is the AI ingenious. Without getting too technical,
hmm
in the traditional world, traditional education with AI, you have like three main forms of AI. And then the ultimate form is something that's taking in input from the world, is processing that input to decide the next best move because it has a goal in mind.
hmm
Ingenious has a goal in mind. Um, in an easy word, I guess you could say it's financial prosperity for others, or to allow them that goal of, with saving or trading.
Mhm.
And to do this, Genius also, with the AI world, takes in input and processes that input. And
Okay.
just because Solidity is very different and transactionally based, its means of processing that input, you have to create your own without getting gas too expensive, because gas can get crazy.
Right.
There's a lot of novelties in there that need to take place. But Genius, as far as its brain and how's its thinking and such, Genius has many incentives that incentivize like humans to act and do things, and it's part of its strategy. Another part of its strategy is how it reacts to its users' actions to get a understanding of what is potentially going on in the world outside of it.
Mhm.
Because Genius does not use any oracles, and
It
after
does. Okay.
all, one of the biggest reasons we have oracles today is like to find the price of something in the market, right? To find the price of this or that, in many other ways. But so here, Genius, it strategizes to get human beings to deposit collateral to the
Mhm.
contract, right?
Mhm.
And besides the AI, everything else has to be great. Like, people have to understand it's immutable code. It has been audited for security 3 times. There's no developer coins, so no developers are sitting there, rubbing their evil hands together, getting rich,
Right.
and no admin keys. And no admin keys is in the way where tokenomics cannot be changed in a destructive manner or someone's coins lost, etc. So no admin keys on there. And
Mhm.
immutable. I think I already said that one.
Yeah.
So Genius strategizes, first of all, to get people to deposit collateral. It rewards those who are holding, right? 2 different ways: holding long term, holding short term. It also, all of the incentives are strategies. It also incentivizes users to, let's say you're mining or you have your stake for 1,000 days or 4,000 days. It also incentivizes you to break that promise. And these incentives are part of determining what's going on in the outside world. Like, for example, well, if a lot of people are breaking their promises in this day, there's probably a really good reason to break that promise. I mean, who knows what's going on? So with all of the users' interactions, Genius determines a kind of a picture of what's going on in the world around it, and in that reaction, right, especially to the size of people's miners, how their miners compare with other size miners, or even users that are just redeeming their Genius for collateral,
Mhm.
for the in contract liquidity. So Genius, by that, it changes its supply accounting dynamics, or its supply accounting. It changes, similar to Ampleforth, but not in the way of like rebasing, none of that rebasing stuff.
Right. Okay.
And Genius also scales up and down the rewards, or the APY, for the users. So a combination of this is for that end goal for users to do what is really better for the whole ecosystem going forward.
Absolutely. No, it's very interesting with how an integration of AI can really create such a such a expansive environment for a particular project, whether it be a cryptocurrency or any industry, even outside of a cryptocurrency.
Yeah, and this,
Very interesting.
not only is AI important for this, but also bizarre math.
Hmm.
The math we use today in finances, I hope people get inspired that they have to break those rules in math,
Hmm.
because the math that has been designed for economics is it's designed to make an entity rich, right? So your math has to be different to designed to make your whole community prosper, or
Yeah.
all of your user base. So Genius has bizarre math. In one way, if you're familiar with the phi constant, it's considered
Not a
the
clue what
golden
that is.
ratio. It's like the golden ratio. If you see all the great statues from the ancient Greece time, right, versus the Roman statues, you'll notice like something looks really weird about the Roman statues. Well, the Greeks, they used this ratio called the golden ratio
Oh,
for
that,
everything
yeah,
in the
that I
human
know of.
body.
Yes, that I know
Yeah.
of. Hmm.
So you see, the golden ratio is something even in ancient times that helped amazing things happen. And you hear Fibonacci sequence, you see Fibonacci series, and you see that applied with trading, right? So all of the math in Genius, it's all based on phi, the golden ratio. There's no, hey, let's multiply this by 2, or hey, let's divide that by 10, or hey, let's do, no, it's all based entirely off phi, which has a different result when growing, especially growing economically. So, I mean, besides that, you have weird economic math, bizarre economic math, like when you sell to a collateral pool or you sell in the market, the more selling pressure you have, the price goes down, right?
Right.
Well, if you change the math, right? If you change the math and you're selling to the Genius contract, the price actually goes up.
Oh,
I'm not saying it jumps up incredibly, but it goes up. And while I understand there's a lot of people who don't understand this yet,
it's over my head. For me personally,
yeah, it's easy math.
mathematics.
It's like doing averages. So eventually people will understand it and be like, oh, that makes sense. Why don't we all do finance like that? Oh, because all finance is designed to make this bank rich, and or these governments rich. And in our world of DeFi, we need to change our math for the community.
Absolutely. There's something that I really wanted to discuss with you that I'm very curious about as well, because I believe that the future of cryptocurrency is interoperability. I believe multi-chain technology will inevitably bring a lot of user adoption, a lot of growth, and a lot of interconnectivity between different layer ones, layer twos, layer zeros. And I think that there's value in understanding the mechanics of projects that have deployed on many different chains to have that notion of understanding. So for what I've seen, Genius has launched on multiple layer one blockchains, to my knowledge. And why is being multi-chain crucial in an ever-evolving market surrounding a cryptocurrency or a DApp or something along those lines?
Before I answer that,
Sure.
I don't know what a layer 0 blockchain is. And if I don't know what something is, I'm going to ask, what is that?
I'm sorry?
Did you say, or sorry, did you misspeak when you said a layer 0 blockchain?
When I said layer 0, I mean more like Polkadot and stuff like that. Like Polkadot's a layer 0.
Okay. Oh, cool.
Yeah. So like layer 0 basically is the framework for a blockchain that allows for example, layer 0 is basically a blockchain that allows for interoperability. So like, for example, Polkadot would be considered a layer 0 because it has all the parachains connected to it. So that would be a layer 0.
I gotcha. Like a framework for everything working together.
So yeah, so I'm curious to hear your perspectives on that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I mean, I'm familiar with Mr. Wood's stuff as like I personally know Anthony Diorio, one of the main founders of Ethereum. I've talked with Vitalik multiple times, only in Mandarin, unfortunately. The moment he found out I could speak Chinese, he refused to speak or type to me in any other language. So I'd been around. I'm sorry?
Could I ask you a question, Rob? So there's a lot of people in the chat bringing up the past, and I'm curious if you could just, before we go to that one, I have Motley Investor in here, and I have Nathan Cartwright in here talking about like scams and losing money in a wall of coins. I don't know anything about any of this, to be honest with you. I really don't. Something about claiming to be a CEO. Like what exactly is going on? I don't. So yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, if you could specify, I really don't know what's going on.
Okay. Well, yeah, I don't know what's going on either, other than everybody's called a scammer. I see here with claiming to be a CEO. I had a blockchain software development company.
Okay.
And it was great because when you're in software, you spend a lot of time like working on websites and web software, etc. And it's pretty boring, and it pays decent, right? And then in the blockchain world, it pays amazing. And one of the clients that my company had was Wall of Coins.
Mhm.
And so, I know the owners of Wall of Coins really well. One of them died like 2 years ago.
Okay.
Pretty tragic.
Yeah.
He had a daughter
I-
and stuff.
Yeah.
So, I'm very familiar with Wall of Coins. Um, my team put together their initial technology, and then we helped with some technology later on that helped them do multiple chains, such as Dash. And I've never claimed to be the CEO, but many times, many times I had, because the website had me on there, right?
Right. Mhm.
That I was the project leader, project manager. Really was more of a technology role, but also on top of that was, Wall of Coins was interesting. It was novel. So where these things come from, scams, I think it has a lot to do with like imposters being everywhere. Somebody contacts you on Telegram
Mhm.
and they're all like, "Hey, what's up? This is Robert. Why don't you do this and do that?" And they're like, "Okay, sure, Robert." Or, "Oh
Mhm.
my God, I've always wanted to talk to you, Robert." So we know that happens a lot in the crypto world. I even have like people on Telegram, and I think this is a good idea. So I'd like to share this with everybody.
Sure.
When you know people who are very influential, it's great to change their name in Telegram. So I think a big combination of things like that happens in that prior time. Uh, so yeah, I've never claimed to be the CEO of Wall of Coins. I've never said that out loud or anything or whatever. So, but there's people that say that I have. But other people have called me that. And, sometimes in interviews, when you're given an interview, sometimes you kind of like fade out and you don't hear. Um, Interviews, articles, I've stated, hey, that's not the case. My
Yeah.
company, Trust, we developed the software, and um,
No,
and yeah, it was
it
a
seems
great relationship, and it
it
opened
seems
up a lot of opportunities. So thank
and
you
like
for asking that. I
no,
appreciate it.
no, I appreciate it because it's just there's a lot of controversy in the live chat right now because again, like I've watched Genius from the sidelines and I see that it's it's launching on numerous chains. It's launching more. It's launching on different chains. Superman just talked about it, so I know that Superman cares about credibility, and I'm just curious because they're bringing up like look at the Genius
Well,
launch.
the multi-chain approach is great
I
that you're
agree.
talking about and you're curious about.
Mhm,
There's people that will FUD and say FUD and will go really hard when it affects their investment.
mhm.
For example, right? Let me give you an example because I think this would be great for people to really understand. Um, in my background, by the way, I've worked a lot with exchanges.
Mhm.
Um, the CEO of Bitstamp, Nate, that's what he goes by. It's a Slavic
Okay.
name that a lot of people can't pronounce. Um, one of the things that my software company was pushing really hard was cold storage, because back then a lot of people didn't think that cold storage was something that could be done. You had a lot of programmers that didn't know much about blockchain, and they're telling their CTO, they're telling their technology officer, they're like, "Oh, you can't do it this way. You got to do it that way."
Mhm.
So, so through this, with 100% cold storage, I had developed relationships with Bitstamp. I'd worked um, with the chief legal officer of Kraken. He's
Okay.
known as the dean of Bitcoin, Marco Centuri.
Yeah, I've
I've
heard
worked
of
with him for quite a while, paid him an insane amount of money, and it goes on and on, right? So in the in the exchange world, one thing that's interesting, and by the way, this is related to people like Motley Investor, um, you know, spending their valuable time. I mean, their time is valuable, right? And then they'll spend it to what, speak badly about a project.
no.
That's fine. But in the exchange world, this is actually related.
Mhm.
In the exchange world, what you have is when you have really successful tokens, like Hex, for example. Hex was very successful.
Mhm.
When you have a lot of success, and you were do you remember that time where Hexkins were saying like, Coinbase, we'd love you to
Yes,
have Hex on there.
I do remember that. Yeah.
um, yeah, so I knew personally two of the lawyers at Coinbase. One recently left Coinbase. He was in charge of staking,
Mhm.
and another that worked a lot with the accounting. Now you see, when you bring on a coin as huge as Hex was,
Right.
you have a big, I mean, obviously things like an OA can be a problem, but
Yeah.
you see, they have the same fear that people like Motley Investor have, or people like whoever that has a big stake with Hex or whatever. They have the same fear because they have a big stake in Bitcoin. They have a huge stake in Ethereum.
Mhm.
So when they bring a token that is already massive and massively growing, and then they can bring that to a huge audience, they have to strategize how their accounting is going to change and how their holdings are going to change.
Mhm.
Because while it may be profitable to bring something like Hex onto their exchange, the loss of value at their other tokens disposal is a real concern. It's a very much concern. And you have that same concern with whales with cryptocurrencies.
Of course.
They have a huge concern of other things being a better product, which Genius is the superior product. And that gets into distribution, which we can talk about later too. It's
Yeah.
important to distribute properly.
And this is
Multi-chain approach, right?
no, absolutely. And I want to bring these up because I know people are asking in the chat, and like I don't want to undermine what people are saying.
Yeah. Well, maybe
So
how about we save Q&A for the end?
I could say, yeah, we could do that. Yeah, if for everyone who is in the chat asking questions or bringing things up that are rather controversial, just stay in here. I have, I think, how many more questions do I have? I have four more. One of them is very short. It's basically asking like, do you have plans to launch on Pulse Chain? Like, are you going to launch Genius on Pulse Chain or once Pulse Chain launches?
Well, disclaimer, I'm not part of the launch team.
Oh, you're not? Okay.
No, but consulting, I guess you can say, is part of it, but ultimately I don't control that. Now, when it comes to Pulse Chain, right, which we all can't wait for Pulse Chain to come out,
Of
right?
course.
Especially because I know one of the developers from the Pulse Chain personally, um, and I know that their mission is innovation, and I know that their mission is good. You have lots of different blockchains now, which did hurt Pulse Chain's, because Pulse Chain, it was really a timely thing that needed to be released. It was very important that it got released. It was a timely time, but
Right. Back in the
but
yes.
still being late though. Um, when it comes to innovation that's not out there, right? It's like okay to be late. So here we can't wait for Pulse Chain, and I know that their core desire is innovation, and that's better for everyone, especially remember the largest airdrop and copies. So when it comes to Pulse Chain, my guess is that um, there'll be a copy just like anything else, and
Mhm.
that's because that's what Pulse Chain says. For example, on Genius, people who are mining with Genius, they'll have copies of their miners. If they have Liquid Genius, then um, they'll have copies of those tokens, copies of their Genius NFTs. And what I do want to say is a lot of people have been wondering Pulse Chain, like about stable coins, how that's going to work,
Yeah.
right? It's
Because
already pretty much been established that USD coin, or
mhm.
USDC is probably not going to be the case there. And it would make sense that it wouldn't, especially from a business. I worked with a lot of early. I remember I ran a software company and also C-level for different companies. Um, remember, well, with software, so in the stablecoin world, like Craig Sellers, for example, he was one of the co-founders for Tether. He and I used to chat it up quite often on Skype. Remember Skype, and then
Yes, I
now
do.
Telegram. And USD Tether, because of the things that go on with these stablecoins, probably won't happen with Pulse Chain. But DAI from MakerDAO, right? It has multiple collaterals. MakerDAO, their DAI decentralized stablecoin. I believe that has the best chance of reaching parity with the US dollar. Also, Liquidity, LUSD, but you see, which is what Liquid Loans I heard was based off of. But you see, Genius, the Genius contract currently doesn't accept USDC as collateral. It accepts DAI. So when you get a copy of that, onto Pulse Chain, it's very possible that it's very possible that some crazy things will happen temporarily for Genius's tokenomics, and its AI and algorithms and such will balance that back out. But it's very possible that with that copy, people will have something that is parity. So disclaimer, I'm not part of the launch team. I don't think that's going to have to happen anyways because of Pulse Chain's copy nature.
No, absolutely. And I want to ask you about, because I really think that these questions in the chat are very important. And
sure.
Because early on, about 6 to 12 months ago, I did hear a few things that were very negative around you, and things that I've heard. And, I deleted the other video that we had as a result of that. And I'm curious I've seen the launch of Genius on multiple different chains, and I've seen that there is a community behind you, and I've seen that there has been growth. And I'm curious to put these things into light, because there's a lot of accusations going on, and I think that it's much more paramount to discuss that
Sure.
than the other two topics I have. So
sure, and not only that too, the how you say it, like Satoshi, for example, right? Satoshi left the project, wasn't in the project. I'm not saying I'm leaving, what's going on, but you have Genius that's an immutable contract, cannot be changed, has great utility. The only Genius I have, well, I'm fully staked, but the only Genius I have, right? People don't want, people are like, hey, do we want to support these people? What's going on? And I don't like to entertain rumors and et cetera and other things that are getting serious. I have my lawyers for, right? So ultimately, you have Genius being run entirely by the community, Genius team. And then you have me speaking about it. You have a community member named Shade speaking about it, who's very intelligent. Not somebody who's been in like the blockchain industry working in it per se, but somebody who's very intelligent. So you have a lot of people talking about Genius. So here, we have limited time to talk about Genius. Are we gonna talk about Genius, or are we gonna address things that are getting that are rumors and have gotten spun around?
Well,
you're talking about a year ago. So
I mean, I am talking
let's
about.
talk real quick about something a year ago.
No, I know that
to rest again.
But no, I know, but that there is value in discussing things that put my reputation on the line. And I know I was very hesitant to do this interview to begin with because of all these reasons that I have seen. And did I want to give the benefit of the doubt? Of course. I try to do that, and I understand that with projects, doing things in regards to projects, you can't find them all. But I do want to bring up these things. I did ask a lot of my questions. So, for example, we have Toby Wan in here, and how can even GRC figure out what a scam this is? And Corey's giving this guy eyeballs. I took down the previous interview, yes, and the reason why I have him back, there's no oddities whatsoever. It was the fact that I see that Genius was launched on a multi-chain technology. Superman has just talked about it. I've seen the community grow. So I was curious to hear the perspective surrounding Genius. I see Raquel in here talking about how you're a scammer and much worse. Motley said, yeah, Corey fucking dropped the ball on this one. I was up to speed. Am I up to speed? I would say that I'm aware of some things that happen. I know that Hexagons are not very happy about Genius. For a variety of reasons.
I'd say a lot of Hexagons are very happy about Genius.
And
Hexagons aren't happy about the constant turmoil, which I know, you being around in the dash times, or before the dash times, has seen that turmoil really spoil a great community. Now remember, Corey, there are tons of entities against crypto, and you know why? Good reasons why, right? The crypto should not be having infights at all. When I first got into crypto, launched a company, etc. And by the way, to announce some things here, no, I'm not a scammer. Um, I'm somebody who follows my desires to create things, and that's what I really like to do: follow my passions and desires to do that. But here in the beginning of crypto, Roger Ver, myself, Eric Voorhees, when we all got together, well, we didn't really get together, but we're all on like IRC chat. There was a very important mission, and that mission, and that's why I focused on adoption later, really focused on software that enabled adoption, is it's so incredibly important that now I'm not, by the way, I'm not pushing these things to the side. I'd like to get to them, but I want to highlight that in the beginning, it was like, wow, this technology, Bitcoin, is so world changing. We have to make sure this happens, and we have to make sure it happens before it's snuffed out. Like, look in China. In China, Bitcoin is illegal, or it's different for the laws of that. So here, infighting, drama, etc. Corey, I would be very wary to entertain any of that, because after all, I don't think you're doing a channel to discuss drama and such, but we should talk about, we should definitely address concerns.
I'm not discussing
but
drama.
Instead, bring people together for that mission, for cryptocurrency to take over, to assist people in what they're doing, to give better freedoms to people, etc.
No, I'm not debating that by any means. But what I am saying is that
what I'm saying is these are tactics of people fighting that inevitably is why they can't do great things in the world. You had the forefathers, 1776 Declaration of Independence. They had a mindset of decentralization. Did a great job for the time and the technology.
I understand. I understand that completely. What I'm saying is that there are concerns in here, and those are valuable concerns to me, because I didn't know the extent. I didn't know the extent of what I'm seeing here. So, because I was under the impression that
I haven't looked either.
there was a lot of hostility towards Genius because it was similar to Hex, and I know that there were some accusations going around. I know that people said you were a scammer, but then it ended up being your father who had the same name as you, supposedly. And I was like, all right, let me just back off of this. And 12 months later, I see that it's been launched on different protocols, and I see that people are talking about it. So I am very curious about, these are things that I want to discuss, because as a person who tries to pride myself on being neutral and really learning about what's going on, I think this is valuable. So, and it seems like there's a universality of people in here talking about this. So I saw this little thing I saw this back and forth.
By the way, if it has to do with Raquel, she's my recent ex.
Okay, because I know
I don't want to entertain ex drama, or her running to influencers telling them that she's on assisted living when it's a place that I fully paid for. So I don't want to entertain that.
Okay,
I don't want to entertain anything with my ex. It's a lot of emotions I'm going through, and I hope you respect that.
No, that's
fine.
I
know you pride yourself on neutral. If you do pride yourself on neutral stuff, like that's great. That's a good moral to have. And after all, being neutral is also, you have this talking about Genius and interviewing me on this, right? And a lot of people came here to hear about it and to ask questions about Genius, right? A lot of people came to do that. And so entertaining these other things really, from a neutral perspective, is unkind to them.
I agree,
or it's unkind to our mission and what we're discussing here.
And I completely understand that. And because I asked, what Genius is, what Genius unions are, the AI component, what is the multiple layer ones, if you're launching on Pulse Chain. We talked a little bit about the airdrop, but there's a lot of people in here. There's a lot of people in here now that aren't asking about the intricacies of Genie. They're talking about, like, if you look at the chat, it's not about the intricacies of Genie.
Let me look at the chat
right now. It's not questions whatsoever about Genie. It's about things that are very important to me as well.
Oh yeah, like he left me and the kids with nothing. Yeah, I'm not staying anywhere. Yeah, I mean,
no, Motley.
Corey,
I did
sure,
not know.
sure. What would you like to ask, Corey?
Motley,
What would you like to
I
ask?
didn't know he was on Superman prior than this. I did not know that. I know that Superman basically was. I just was informed about Genius.
Yeah. So what questions would you like to ask?
Sure.
You
So
know, you saw the chat. Go ahead and ask.
Sure. All right. So let me go up to Motley Investors questions. So the first question here is, I want to go back and look at the Genius launch. A token minted to one address, sent out to many addresses, pumped the price, provided liquidity, then offered a 3x multiplier if you sacrificed. Then also the same addresses then sacrificed and simultaneously dumped on people as they bought in for the multiplier during the sacrifice.
All right. I'm listening.
What does that mean?
Well, it's untrue, first of all. I don't see how a Motley Crue investor would know this if he's, after all, not a Genius person or not somebody who has been following this community. But what he's discussing, though, is a very important point, and that has to do with distribution, right? I'm looking at some of the chats too here. Distribution in crypto, and if I may. So first of all, I'd like to address what he's saying is not true. And second, let me tell you a bit about the distribution, because that's important. And he's talking about the distribution. Let me tell you what happened. And, you know, anyone who's hearing about this can understand, look into it, talk with people in the Genius community who've been there and hear, you know, the validity of that, or validity of what either side. Because really that's how the only people who are going to know are the people who were there and witnessed it, right? And including that are people who've been through that story, right? Who have watched it, who've participated in the sacrifice. So this has to do with distribution. Now, you understand that it's super important. It's so important. It's crazy important. An important stage in crypto is distributing the supply to the masses fairly, right? It took a long time for Bitcoin to do this, or I feel. Do you feel that Bitcoin is distributed fairly?
Do I think it's distributed fairly? I mean, it depends on the miners and all and the intricacies of that. So, you know,
I mean the current distribution. Remember, at first it was just Satoshi mining for a while. As far as the Bitcoin itself, who holds what, etc., do you feel that it's relatively fair after 13, 14 years? Or not, maybe not fair, but well distributed enough to where it has a market that is healthy.
I don't know.
Okay, well, I mean that's fair to not know. Oh, are there cryptos that you feel have a healthy distribution?
Some, I guess.
Yeah. Well, like today we would say the US dollar doesn't have a fair distribution, but back in the late 1900s, 1920s, the US dollar was distributed by anybody who had attention on it. For example, people who were even sweeping the road, even though the sweeping the road was not a valuable job, to get US dollar into circulation. So here, what would you agree, though, that an important stage in crypto is distributing the supply?
I'm looking at the chat, and honestly, like,
well, Corey, focus here. You look at the chat, right? And how are we going to talk about important things here?
There's a lot of presumptions here, and not a presumptions, and maybe
sure.
And I know that Gold Key brought up.
Can I answer this individual's?
Sure.
If somebody's going to say something about this, right, and you're giving me a voice, are you going to give them a voice? Are you giving me a voice? Of course, you want to give your community a voice. But here, something that's untrue about the distribution. Let me address that, right?
Go ahead.
You want that to be addressed, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Go ahead.
All right. So that's what so distribution is super, super important. And Genius was made to rapidly distribute Genius itself. And here's how it happened. In the beginning, there was a pre-token. Do you remember the pre-token?
I do not.
Oh, well, when you interviewed me, there was the pre-token. When you first interviewed me.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
don't
Are
remember.
you okay, Corey? Are
Yeah,
you
I'm good.
okay?
It's just a lot of stuff going on right now that I was
Yeah.
not
No,
able to.
no. Well, hey, if you want, we can do this. I would love to talk about the distribution here and go on the claims. Uh, show against these claims of, I don't remember, a bunch sent to one address and etc. Well, first of all, with any token, right? With any token and many ERC tokens, that can be the case. So here, the beginning of Genius, right? There was a pre-token called the Legacy Genie,
Mm-hmm.
later called LGenie. And this deliberately had no functionality other than to distribute on decentralized exchanges,
Mm-hmm.
right? So this pre-token, it was given freely and also traded privately. You can see on the blockchain, traded privately to the very first decentralized exchange liquidity providers. Because after all, you got to start distributing somehow. And so that step was completed, but also completed, right? That step was completed, and any of the supply of the legacy Genius token that wasn't in the hands of people who just wanted to provide liquidity for it,
Mm-hmm.
that the rest of it was burned. So you'll see a big supply in the dead address. The dead address is basically an address that no one can pay from or no one can spend. So that was done. That was like step one, mission accomplished. Step two, that was also completed, was a sacrifice phase that was launched to allow anyone with a crypto wallet to participate. And with that sacrifice, you can see more information about it if you want. Sacrifice.to. And by the way, remember, I'm bringing you through the distribution
No,
of
I
Genius, how it's
know.
distributed. So step two, the sacrifice phase, this is where I believe you said there was a 3x, multiple for, sacrificing, but I know he's referring to the mechanics of that. Go to the website sacrifice.to on your time and you'll see it. But so here with the sacrifice, the objective was to completely get the pre-token out of existence.
Mm-hmm.
And by doing so, 85%, doing so for the official Genius token, 85% of that would be distributed to sacrifice participants, or maybe 100%. And a maximum of 15% or 14.5% would be distributed to the remaining holders of the legacy token, as after all, there were people out there that didn't sacrifice it, and etc. So the legacy token, as a pre-token, it was designed to have no functionality and to be able to give people distributed access to the mature Genius token, to the official contract. So what's amazing is you had distribution for the official Genius contract before the official Genius contract came out.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, sacrifice, a lot of people seem to think that was invented in the Hex community. No, that's been around since 2018, by the way. So then step two was completed. And the sacrifice, it encouraged and incentivized users to remove their legacy Genius from supply, effectively bringing the pre-token supply and value down to zero. So that was the point, the goal. So the result was a sacrifice address that held relatively very little value, thus improving Genius distribution of the official token. I say little value because if the sacrifice address is holding like a massive amount of the legacy token, and the legacy token by design goes to a price of zero, right? So people who could have sold the legacy token for $1,000, $40,000, etc., people who became millionaires from it, instead of liquidating, at something they got for a penny that hit $1.60, and at another time over $2, they sacrificed instead of liquidating that, over like nearly $2 billion, not billion, over $2 million worth of liquidity on that. So all right, then step three completed. Upon launch, right, the Genius token, it was distributed to all of the sacrifice participants, and all the legacy Genius holders, they were able to mint Genius miners and thus the Genius token. But due to the legacy supply at the time, distribution was less than 15%.
Okay.
So continued on that. Even today, the sacrifice address holds like 33 million legacy Genius tokens worth. If there was liquidity, it could be worth at the low level 80 grand or something. So the remainder of the Genius bonuses were distributed. Now, step 4 in Genius, because remember, distribution is super important. You have whales that can distribute the supply. And in fact, it's so important that I'm confident one of the biggest reasons why Hex is not on large exchanges, and Hexicans don't like me saying this, just like Hedron people didn't like me saying, hey, there's problems with the tokenomics, you should fix this. But a big problem with the OA is for exchanges. Exchanges see that. Exchanges know that their customers are people that many entities want to dump on. So it's kind of tragic in the Hex world, because you and I know that that there are very benevolent qualities with that, right? You familiar with the benevolence of
The
the
OA,
OA for Hex?
yeah, the benevolence of OA has never sold a single hex. You don't have you have an ability for an origin address to keep a project from succumbing to a very large actor destroying the project in the matter of one cell.
Yeah, and that's insanely important, right?
Yes.
And what has it done to and the OA? What has that done for Hex stakers?
What it's done
In
for
your
hex
own words.
What it's done for hex stakers is allowed for the facilitation of the APY yield to continuously occur at a
Yeah,
stable rate.
correct. Because if you do some quick math, and I'll do it here, 3.69%. If 100 people are staking, people are making on average, or getting paid every day an average of 3.69% on an annual basis. But then when only 10% of people have that, right? So you take you take 3.69%, you divide that by 0.1, and then suddenly you have 36.9%. So yes, the Hex OA had very good things. Now, when it comes to distribution, though, this is a massive problem. It's sadly massive. But here, step 4, right? This is an ongoing step with Genius and its distribution. So we talked before about whatever it is he or Toby, whatever, stated. It's not true. And then what you have today, for people to understand distribution is great, and especially for future tokens. So step 4, ongoing. The Genius contract, it has 4 core plans for rapid distribution, strategies that are superior to Bitcoin's mining distribution, and as well, superior to some other things that I'll move on for that. One are mining penalties. Hex does this too. It's pretty cool, but it's staking penalties. The second is Genius debt itself. The third is a proof of benevolence function. Recently, a whale wanted to run this proof of benevolence function and got to experience how tokens were distributed between Genius users. And the fourth are the Genius NFTs. So, as a Hexagon, you would understand, okay, mining penalties, staking penalties, those are redistributed, right? They're redistributed to people who are keeping their promise, right? And that was really smart of Hex, don't you think?
I would say so.
I mean, I would say it's probably one of the smartest things in crypto, right? Because it's great for redistribution.
Yes. No. I was going to say I think Hex has been brilliantly designed. That's why I make content about it, because I believe it's brilliantly designed.
Yeah, and it's a shame that so many people, like in the Bitcoin community, right, just slam Richard Hart as a scammer and twist his words around to say like, oh, you're looking at this, and what about the OA, and etc. It takes people's focus off that. But the distribution part, this is where Hex got distribution good. Now with Genius, with Hex, you have half of the fees from breaking your mining promise or your staking promise or ending too late. You have half of the fees going to an origin address. And with Genius, you have about 2/3 of the fees being redistributed to miners, advanced miners. You have about 1/4 of it being burned indefinitely, but burned in a way that does not lower the APY, and does not affect its future distribution. So it doesn't negatively impact users. And then you have like 14.5%, which basically all these numbers are based on the golden ratio that we talked about before.
Yes.
14.5% that goes to a treasury. And by the way, the treasury, this is good too, because some people may say, like, some people, for example, how the Bitcoin world wanted to trash Hex, which Bitcoin holders, I hold such little Bitcoin, it's not even funny. Even though I'm impressed with Bitcoin's resilience. But you have these big time holders of Bitcoin where small fluctuations can be billions, well, hundreds of millions of dollars for them.
Mm-hmm.
And most of the owners of Bitcoin today, as Richard Hart has said, are bankers. And it is true. It's very true. So here, right, you don't have, with Genius, your redistribution isn't going, to an OA. Part of it's being burned in a way that helps the whole ecosystem. 2/3 of it is going to advanced miners, and a very small amount is going to a OA beneficiary, let's call it, which the selection of the OA beneficiary, in the beginning, how that was selected was as random as you could think it could be.
Mm-hmm.
If you want me to talk more about that, I will, but I'll just finish with the distribution part.
No,
because this is pretty amazing. This is amazing right here. This is amazing, and I've been developing the language on this lately. Genius debt, right? Genius, the Genius contract, it incentivizes users to issue debt by depositing collateral, right? Like,
okay.
Have you ever used MakerDAO, like, to deposit collateral there and get DAI?
Personally, no. I haven't used stable coins that much, besides with the exception of maybe on occasion Tether or on occasion USDC. I've maybe used DAI a few times, but not very often.
Corey, you would love it. Corey, you would love it.
I know a lot of people venerate DAI for a lot of reasons, and rightfully so. I've heard people say that DAI would be a good a good stable coin launching on Pulse Chain. So,
and I agree. Well,
I don't know.
So how, like, did you learn more about Hex when you were reading about it, or when you actually jumped in and used it?
I actually learned about Hex through Pulse Chain. I mean, I personally got into Hex as a result of Pulse Chain. I mean, I personally found out about Pulse Chain through a friend of mine on Twitter who was talking about new layer ones that were going to be launched. And I was very interested in the layer one, the energy efficiency, the slow, lower block time amounts, and the community behind it. So I was very curious about that. So, it's
and so when we use, like, no matter how much we study something, right, even Pulse Chain, when we use it, we learn so much more. Like in the Hex world, like, pretty much everyone, once they start using Hex, they get even way more bullish, right? And just with Genius users, the same thing. So that's why I mentioned with MakerDAO, like, Corey, take some time to look into MakerDAO and use it. You'll learn a lot more than reading, and you will really like it. So Genius debt, right? Genius incentivizes users to issue debt by depositing collateral. And now, for that debt, any of that debt that's unsettled, that's outstanding, people who redeem their Genius, instead of selling it on the open market, people can also redeem their Genius directly with the contract and not suffer slippage. Slippage is really annoying for whales.
Right. Let me ask you.
And so when they do that, the Genius is distributed to all of the users who deposited collateral. So you see, these are multiple strategies that, not just the AI strategizing, but these are multiple strategies behind the design of Genius for excellent distribution. So there's another way, but it's not as interesting.
So there's a lot of questions surrounding, because I know that Gold Key brought up something that I wanted to bring up. It's definitely. I'm getting a lot of DMs about things that are, for me, like, very
DMs.
Yes, by many.
Let's call it the Bitcoin protectors of their bags, protecting their bags from
But
Hex.
these are these are major things being discussed, and, like,
okay, well, what major thing?
I'll bring them up.
Yeah, let's go through one major thing.
So I'm just asking permission.
Okay.
Because these are big deals to me, and if this is true,
Sure.
I
I mean, if it's a big deal, go ahead and say it. You know,
sure. So
I don't want you to feel like you can't say it to me, or
so
or holding back.
I'm being told, and I did not know about this at all. About
Okay.
again, like these are big things. Um, so I'm going to bring them up just so I'm being told that there's a sexual assault case against you, domestic violence, a
It's not
myriad
true.
of other financial charges, kids being in a safety shelter, a protective order
No,
against you.
it's not
The
true. Nope.
reason you're in a hotel is because you're running away from charges against you in Florida. Stole over 30 grand of
No.
stuff, which is a felony charge. Um,
Yeah.
and charges against him where she is personally. So this is
Yeah. No, none of that's true. Look, the
I think I'm going to end this.
anything that is anything that is like s- some case or something, right? Because after all, Elon Musk, for example, do you know how many do you know how many charges, like not charges, but do you know how many lawsuits he has going on?
I do, but but this is not
It's
Elon
over
Musk.
200, right?
I
It's
know
over
that, but this is
200.
not the richest man.
I'm,
This is
I'm
not the
answering your
richest,
question. Yeah,
but
I'm
this is not
answering
the
your
richest
question.
man in the world.
Would you like me to answer your question?
Yes.
'Cause I'm answering it. Yeah. So for things like that, right? Same thing happens when you're a C-level officer and etc. You're going to have lawsuits, right? People in business and people who are very wealthy, they often look at that as a sign of success. But the things that you're mentioning with, like, children being in a shelter and etc., um, for people who know me very closely, no, this is not true. I don't have any charges against me for domestic violence. My children aren't in a shelter, and I really don't appreciate talking about these things when genius is the focus. I don't appreciate it because my personal relationship. I very much love Raquel, and I do not want to say anything that puts her in a bad light at all.
Yeah.
I don't want that.
With all this, with
And the position that I'm being put in is to either say, "Cool, let's move on with genius," or to do that, and that wouldn't be loving, and I don't want to do that. But I can let you know that those aren't true.
yeah, I think I've heard enough. I really wanted to give a chance because I know that I deleted the other video. I really thought that,
Yeah.
12 months
You
things are
you
going.
brought the video up too. You brought it back, right?
No, I put it back down.
Okay.
I just
Why'd you put it back down?
because I didn't want to, because the controversy for me is something that I really don't want to. There's a difference between being neutral, and then there's a difference between having this many accusations
Yeah.
that.
Well, that's not. Is it neutral doing that though? When there aren't any judges signing things, is it really
but
neutral then?
but
Like, take
when
Hex Joker for example. Hex Joker
well
videos
I
are
know
still up there, and I told him I did an interview with him because everybody hated him.
well I wouldn't interview Hex Joker to begin with because I know things that have happened in the community with him specifically, and I'm getting DMs of, yeah, I'm sorry, I can't do this. These bruises and stuff like that, I can't do this. I can't do this.